Kingdom Creative Podcast. And today we have an interesting guest that not only is he an expert marketer, someone who's been in the game for ages, he's also just 5 years ago, was a pretty adamant and devout atheist, and now is a believer that is using his gifts to reach millions of people online on Instagram with his brand called Faith Funnels. And so I'm very excited to have Justin Brooke on this show. One of the most interesting things that stands out to me is not only his story in coming to Christ, but also too, even before that, and how he was able to take $60 and turn it into six figures. And so today we're going to explore some of these different things, talk about AI, talk about faith, talk about money, talk about business, and a whole bunch of things. So Justin, thank you so much for making the time to have this conversation with me.
Ah, man, Jesse, thanks for having me on, man. This is the best subject in the world. I can't wait to get into it.
Awesome, man. Well, I think one of the burning questions that a lot of people have when it comes to making money online is what actually is working in 2025, and how does a person make an income online?
Yeah. Uh, the problem most people have is that they think that something new is working in 2025. There are some new tools, there are some new tricks and things like that, but I'm quite literally doing some of the same things that I was doing in 2005, to make money, and so the ways to make money, the fastest way is to sell a service. You basically trade your time for dollars, and the fastest way to do that is with a job, right? Like you're trading your time for the boss's dollars. And then the next kind of level up from that is to have clients, which kind of becomes like multiple bosses. And so most people usually want to get out of that. Now, it's a great business. You can make a lot of money in that. You can productize it. You can scale that up. You can systemize it so that it's not such a nightmare, and you can choose better clients so it doesn't feel like having multiple bosses. But kind of the area most people want to be in is product business, right? And so that looks like e-com, where you could be selling coffee mugs or basketball equipment or fashion, whatever, or it could be digital products. I sell courses, you know courses, gets made fun of a lot, but I love the margins on digital courses. The margins are really good. After you make it, it's basically just, ones and zeros. You don't need a factory, you don't need a warehouse, you don't need shipping or anything like that. So that's products. And could also be software. It could be courses, membership sites. There's a lot of different ways of products. And then the next kind of business is, unfortunately, it's the hardest one. It's also where everybody's kind of at right now, and that is the media business. And that is starting a YouTube channel, starting a blog, starting a podcast, a social media. It's like, and the way that you monetize those is you can sell products. Some of the most successful people are now starting to do that, but the traditional way is to sell advertising. If you want to blow up on YouTube or Instagram, you're trying to get brand deals, you're trying to get monetized as a partner or something like that. But what most people don't understand is that is a really, really hard way to make an easy living, and it really doesn't work until you've got like at least 100,000 subscribers. Before that, you're still pinching pennies quite a bit. And so the fastest is services. The Probably the most longevity, if you want to, I don't want to guarantee anybody millions, but products is kind of the sweet spot most people are actually looking for. And then there's media, and that can grow huge. That can be, look at Fox News, look at CNN, whatever you want to say politically about them. They're raking in, these media companies are raking in the dough. And one last thing that I would say is, if you kind of work backwards, there's a little bit of a hack to it, right? If you become your own media, You sell products to monetize it, your own products to monetize it, like Mr. Beast. He's got candy bars and they're doing pretty good. Mark Rober's got this Crunch Labs subscription box. So if you build your own media, so social media blog, sell your own products, and then upsell to services, it's an extremely lucrative model to do things that way.
And I would imagine that if you do it that way, you're probably able to charge a premium, right? Because people already know, like, and trust you, and they're already, wanting what you have. They're willing to probably pay the price. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Once you have that audience, you know what they want, you know what they like, they know you, trust you, and so it's easy to sell them products. And then when you sell services as kind of the upsell or the back end to those products, you get really good margins that allows you to kind of scale up your business, to buy ads, to hire people, all that stuff.
Awesome. So let's just roll with this analogy. Kind of walk me through this. I'm a new person, and I heard what you said, and I'm like, I definitely want to create products. I want to create a brand, but I want to sell digital products, create it one time, sell it over and over again. That kind of fits the ideal lifestyle that I want to have. If I'm just thinking this through in the beginning, what are some of the things that I need to think about if this is what I want to do? Like, what platform, what kind of product, how do I create my product? How do I find my audience? How would I get started?
Yeah, I think probably the best answer to that is to find somebody, and it doesn't have to be a mentor. Obviously, a mentor or a coach is probably the best thing you can find. Tiger Woods, Muhammad Ali, the great Michael Jordan, the greatest of the greats, every single one of them had a coach, because the coach helps you see your blind sides. The coach helps you make less mistakes. Mentor is usually considered like a free coach. You should pay your mentors, guys. Break them off. Honor them. Um, but if nothing less, find an author, find a YouTuber, whatever. Find somebody who's already doing what you want to do. So if you want to sell T-shirts, find a guy who's already crushing it at that, or a woman. If you want to sell courses, find somebody that's already doing that. Where people go wrong is they start collecting lots of gurus. And so it's like, oh, I want to sell courses. I'm just using that as an example. I'm not saying that's the best way. Now all of a sudden you're subscribed to this guy and to this guy and to this guy and to this guy. What happens, what goes wrong is all of them have a good method. Like every guru has made $1 million, right? So the method works. The problem is you start adding different ingredients from all their recipes, and now your loaf of bread comes out weird, or it doesn't rise. Hopefully that analogy connects, but that's the problem is this guy does it a little bit this different, and that guy does it a little bit different, and the next thing you know, you're spun around because you don't know, like, wait, hold on, this guy says this guy says that, what's the actual truth? And so you should just find the one and then follow that one.
So if we're just kind of going down, following this train of thought of a person who wants to, monetize a course, and they
Yeah.
want to sell a course, sell their knowledge, is there a certain platform that they should be focusing on? And just what's your thoughts about, there's different thoughts on, like, focus on just one until you get it. Some people want to focus on many. What's your whole thoughts around which platform and how to approach it?
You know, if you want, like, there's a guy out there, Justin Welsh. I call him the other Justin. He's amazing. He's really awesome. Uh, and he uses, he's all about like the solopreneur, like building, one person $1 million businesses. Um, I'd love to come back to my thoughts on solopreneurism, if you want to talk about that. I've got a different stance than he takes. But he's great, and he teaches using Kajabi. Essentially Kajabi is a one size fits all tool. It'll do your website, it'll host your courses, it'll do your payments, it does everything you need. And so there's tools like that. There's Go High Level, there's Kajabi, there's other tools like that. But probably most people want to pick something like that. I like to have a little bit more control. I don't like when the tool tries to do everything, because then it's not good at any one of the specific things. Like Kajabi's not the best sales page tool. Unbounce is, or ClickFunnels. Kajabi's not the best cart. I think ThriveCart is, but it does all of them pretty well. And so if you're looking for easy, if that's what you want it to be as easy as possible, one bill or something like that, then probably Kajabi. As you grow, you're going to start to, and when I say grow, like when you get past 1 million, like I'm not saying, you're going to have to change quickly, but as you grow, you're probably going to want better tools that are more specific. And so I like that route. And so I use a bunch of different tools to host mine. But essentially, there's kind of two things you need. You need like your website and delivery. If you're doing courses, you need the website, you need a way to deliver the courses, and then you need a way to build your email list. So kit.com with Kajabi, those two things together. And you can mail through Kajabi, but it's better to mail through something like a Kit or a Beehive.
Very good. So if you were to kind of give a high level, just kind of, if you can, roughly, because I know it changes for different people, but kind of like a checklist on like, hey, if you're going to get started, this is what you need to think about. One, two, three, maybe like 5 steps in the process. How would you approach a person just starting out wanting to monetize, their knowledge?
Yeah. So start the way we used to do it in 2005. Like today, everybody's trying to create all these elaborate, fancy funnels, and their, upsell pages, downsell page, all this crazy stuff. We didn't have all that in 2005, so it was easier to start. I would say start with a one-page website, and that one-page website is giving something awesome away for free. And the thing is, if you can't do that, how are you ever going to sell something? And so you want to first a one-page website, give something cool away for free. For example, I give away like a video case study. In times past, I've given away a spreadsheet of resources. I just saw a guy who gave away a spreadsheet of a bunch of, inspiration websites. There was a 1,000 different web designs on there. And I was like, yeah, I'm down for that. I'll give you my email for that. That's a great little resource. And so a one-page website where you trade something of value for an email address. Do that. Get your first at least 100, but probably 1,000 people through there. And in that time, is going from 0 to 1,000 subscribers on that, you're going to learn a lot about your audience. You're going to learn about their needs, their desires, their problems, their goals, and that's going to give you the information on what you should actually sell to them. Which I then want to go into. There's another piece to that. Okay, so you have the one-page website. You're building your audience, and the email audience is the best audience. That's what Facebook wants first. That's what Netflix wants first. Before you join anything, they always want your email address first. Until that stops happening, email is king. Okay, so you're doing that. You got your one-page website. You're giving away your thing. You're getting some subscribers. Now you want to try and sell something. Before you go making a product, make the sales page and make it look like it's live. When you click the order button, here's what I want you to do. When you click the order button, instead of it going to a cart and then trying to deliver the product and all that, what I want it to do is I just want it to go to a coming soon page. Right? And then you say, get 10% off when you join our wait list. If you can't get 10 people to join the wait list, nobody was ever going to buy this product.
Mm.
And if nobody was ever going to buy the product, well, I just saved you probably months of work, And so try to get 10 people to actually be interested enough to click the order button and then get on the wait list. And here's what happens. If you get quite a few people on that wait list, now you've got a wait list of people ready when you actually go and create the product. And that's the best way. That's the fastest, safest, cheapest way that I think people can launch today.
No, that was going to be my next question was what your thoughts were on driving people to it. And I guess it's still part of it is, like I know people have like $5 a day strategies, $1 a day, Do you recommend just creating a bunch of content and kind of seeing what it does from, kind of just from a small test sample size, or do you recommend throwing ads on there? Like, what's your thoughts on trying to get people to that page and see how it performs?
Well, I mean, I could talk for hours on that.
Yeah.
I run ad skills, and that's my company, and that's what we do. And so there's a lot to say. I would say probably the fastest, easiest thing. So you either got time or you got money. So if you one way or another, you have to invest. If you don't have either, I'm going to tell you, tough break. You're going to have to figure out one of them. It doesn't work any other way. So if you've got time, get into social media. Be really consistent. You know, at least one post a day. But really, with the algorithms, like if you do 3 posts a day, that's the trick of how we're reaching millions on Instagram. We went from inconsistent, a couple posts a week to 1 post a day, and it started growing. And then we went to 3 posts a day and it exploded. The algorithms love consistency.
And is
If you,
that consistency of time as well, or is it just make sure you're just dropping three a day?
both, right? Like if you do 3 a day from one day, it's not going to do much for you, right? But
Mhm.
if you do 3 a day for 3 months, it's going to start adding up. You do 3 a day for a year. You do 3 posts a day, 5 days a week. You can take weekends off. You get nights and weekends off. You do 3 posts a day for an entire year, 5 days a week. Man, it will change your life.
Does it matter if those posts are scheduled?
That's what we do.
Okay.
We prefer to schedule them all out on a Monday or something like that. And it helps a lot.
Yeah.
That way you're not a slave to it. And the other thing is, life is going to happen. The baby's going to be crying. You got to do chores or whatever. Life's going to happen, and you're going to get inconsistent. So yeah, try to use some tools to schedule it out. So that's if you have time. Social media, which really just comes to consistently and stay on topic, right? If you're
Mhm.
consistent, is meaning in all areas, right? It's how many posts a day, it's how long you're going to do it, it's the same topic. Like consistency is the key. Algorithms can't figure you out if you're sharing your lunch and then you're talking about business and then you're talking about your
Mhm.
kids. Like the algorithms, like, what are you actually talking about, dude? I don't know what so you got to stay on a topic. If you want to have a personal profile where you share your lunch and you complain about Comcast and whatever else people do on social media, have that. Have your personal one, but also have a professional profile where you act like a professional. You don't argue, you don't share your lunch or anything like that. Like you're just on topic 3 times a day, and it's your job. The
Awesome.
other way we can do you want to talk about that before I go into
Yeah,
any?
let's go. Let's go.
Okay. So the next part of that is if you got money, right? If you don't have time, maybe you got a job or whatever, but you can carve out, let's say, ideally 300 a month, but you can get away with 150 a month. 150 a month is $5 a day, 5 times 30. And then 300 a month is $10 a day. And it's going to let you move a little bit quicker. It really adds up if you can do $10 a day. And so what I would do is I would have either you can drive to that one page website where you're getting leads, or I like to drive to a blog post, and then at the bottom of that blog post. So an example of this, for me, I teach advertising, and so my people are interested in advertising. I've got this blog post that says 10 ads that made millions, essentially. It's a little bit more complicated, but 10 ads that made millions. My people want to read that blog post. They're like, man, that sounds great. It doesn't even look like an ad to them. So they go and they start reading them, and all it is like, hey, I'm Justin Brooke from Ad Skills, and I use these tools to research them. Here's these guys that made millions. Ad one, description, ad two, description. I just listed out. Then at the bottom, it says, hey, when I was doing this research, I actually researched 50 ads that made millions. If you want to read the full PDF with all 50 ads, just enter your email below. We call that a content upgrade, right? Like you came for the 10. You can do it with book lists. You can do it with ads. You can do it with T-shirts. You can do it with all kinds of Bible verses. 10 verses about alcoholism. Here's actually 50 verses about alcoholism. Like you can do it with anything, right? You come for the 10, but then you opt in for the full 50 or 75 or 100 or 1,000, whatever it is, right? It's a content upgrade. So you enter your email. Now, if you will drive $5 to $10 a day to a content upgrade blog post like that, you'll build your list very well over. In fact, that's one of the ways we built $1 million company. We just had lots of those. We would drive $5 a day to each one, but we had 7, 10, 12 of those, and then we would up it to like $25 a day.
Yeah. No, that's some game right there. I'm actually thinking about, yeah, I need to implement that and the wait list as well. I think that's a powerful way to get people bought in and also to follow up with them. Having you on and being able to have a conversation with you, my mind is just like there's so many things I want to ask you. I want to get into, we're going to talk a little bit about AI. We're going to talk about your faith journey. But let me just give you a quick marketing lightning round. Okay. I'm going to throw out some things.
Okay,
Give me some like one sentence answers and to the best that you can. Some of them will probably be general, but you ready for it?
I'm ready.
Okay. Which do you prefer, Facebook ads or Google ads, and why?
Google ads all day. It's bigger in every single way. Bigger company, more impressions, more different types of ads. Like Google ads also has YouTube ads.
What do you think is the future of personal branding? Is it going away? Is it changing? Is it getting more important?
It's not going away. Founder-led marketing is one of the biggest things, right? So Mr. Beast with the candy bars, Alex Hormozy with his school software, and so building a personal brand is great. You should spin off products from that, though.
What's your thoughts on LinkedIn?
Huge. Um, One of the platforms with the least amount of bots and trolls and anonymous people and stuff like that, just the nature of the platform. If you're B2B, it's a must. If you're B2C, figure it out.
What is your favorite tool for creating content?
Ooh, Canva is so dope. Love Canva. So it's like Canva and Zoom are probably the two most important products online right now. But I also am really liking it's made by the same company. There's one called Tweet Hunter and Taplio.
Yeah.
Tweet Hunter helps you schedule and automate Twitter or X, and then Taplio helps you schedule and automate LinkedIn. And they actually work together so you can post on one and it posts to both. It's a great little combo.
With AI kind of coming in and making content creation much more easier, how do you think that that's going to change the landscape of social media?
Well, so some people are saying AI, they call it AI slop, and they're saying AI is ruining the internet because all these people are creating these like AI generated posts. I've been on the internet for 20 years, and that's just as a business owner. I've been on the internet longer than that. This is not, slop is not a new thing. People have been creating junk content for decades, and before that, it was junk books and junk articles and junk magazines. Like, it's just, we're just creating it a little bit faster than usual, so it feels different. AI is great. You need to use AI to increase your productivity, not to replace yourself. If you're trying to replace yourself with AI, you're doing it wrong. You need to use it to be you magnified.
That's a great way to put it. And the last one on this is the three biggest mistakes you see people make when buying ads.
Treating it like it's a slot machine. They just want to, it's luck. Let me put $100 in and see how it works. I'd rather you do $5 a day and stay there, optimize it over time. The other mistake people do is they try to learn from one thing. So they'll have one ad or one landing page. That's also kind of a slot machine. That's a scratch off ticket. A professional will create three ads, will have two landing pages. And that way, worst case scenario, I spend 500 bucks, $100, whatever, and I learn, one of the three ads performed better than the other. One of the landing pages performed better than the other. And it's doing rounds of that optimization where you kind of crack the code. You literally figure out the combination lock, and then that's when you start making millions. Third mistake that they do is not understanding the power of intent, right? So what I mean by that, I'm not saying Facebook ads is bad, it's just Facebook ads is what's called interruptive advertising. You went on there to talk with your family and your friends and browse your feed, and then you stumbled on an ad that looked interesting. But that's interrupting your day. You were doing something else. YouTube ads, same thing. I was watching somebody else's video. Your video came on. Congratulations, it was a great ad and I want it, but you still interrupted my day.
Mhm.
The difference with Google, why I'm a Google guy, is it's intent, right? I had a problem. My tooth was aching or whatever. I got up off the couch. I went over to Google and I typed in dentist near me. And then I saw an ad for a dentist, right? You can't do that on Facebook ads or YouTube ads, like the power of intent. That person wanted that thing at that moment is huge, and understanding that will change your entire game and outlook on advertising.
That's awesome. And I think if anybody's listening and they love what they're hearing, this is only a small sliver of everything that Justin does and he has to offer. I would definitely go and check out Ad Skills. It's a library full of tons of resources from everything that you can think of in the advertising world, creating content, LinkedIn, YouTube. I mean, they got so much stuff in there. It's literally like an MBA of advertising and creating content. So definitely check out Ad Skills for more on that. I do want to get now into this AI startup that you had. Now, you were one of the people that I first seen actually create an AI company. You started it, you grew it very quickly,
Mhm.
and then it seemed like out of the blue, you sold it. And
Yeah.
so it was like, whoa, it was growing. It always kind of baffled me from the outside, going like, what was that? Why did that happen? So give us an idea of the AI startup you started, when you started it, and what it was, and then why you sold it.
Yeah. The short version of it is I'm a charismatic Christian. I believe we can hear God's voice. I believe, Jesus said, "My sheep hear my voice." And one day when I was praying at men's prayer about my business, I felt like I heard a clear, I didn't create that, talking about AI. And then I felt like I heard or got a confirmation that I should use it, but I shouldn't build a business around it. It's a
Mm,
tool for the lane that I already had. For whatever reason, I believe God wants me in the advertising world. I'm still trying to figure out why, but like I've tried many different things, and there's so much fruit and blessings when I'm in that lane. And so I'm trying to stay in that lane, but I do use AI to kind of boost my productivity and help me create better products and things in that lane. But yeah, I since that time, thinking about those words and talking with pastors and doing studies and things like that. Like if you think about it, now I'm not saying AI is a demon or we shouldn't use it or anything like that. But like if you just think about what the letters actually mean, AI, it's artificial intelligence. That's fake intelligence. What did God create? God created the real intelligence, right?
that's right.
And so I think it's one of those things we have to be careful of. We know that AI can lie, you know, God doesn't lie, and so it will hallucinate. It will come up with things. It will sound really confident, like
Mm,
you can go onto any chat GPT and you can say, hey, give me 100 dentists in my area. And it will give you like 17 of them that are real because it knows that from reading the entire internet, but it will then make up a list and it'll sound perfect. It'll sound really good. And so it's really good at lying I don't know. That goes off on a different track, you know. And
Yeah.
so it's a tool, it's a faster typewriter, it's a faster library. Like what we're doing is not evil with AI. We used to go to the library and we would look up the Dewey Decimal System and we would find books and we would read that information, you know. It's the same thing we're doing now. We could just do it really fast with AI. But I felt a check that I shouldn't be building my whole business and identity around that.
And when did you start it and when did you sell it?
I started it so ChatGPT came out. I think it was November of 2023 or 2022. And I started it probably 3 months after that, so it would have been like January 2024, and then I sold it. I don't know, 2 or 3 months later. You
Yeah.
know, yeah,
Yeah. And what's your kind of, you mentioned that you use AI now,
yeah,
but what's your thoughts overall just on how fast, because obviously it's moving quite fast now than it was when ChatGPT first came out. And obviously there's been forms of it that have existed for years before this, but we've never seen it like it's moving now. And some people are kind of relating it to, like .com when it first, came out, internet, like what's your thoughts on the industry? Do you think that it's taken over that way, or is it just a bunch of hype, or what's your thoughts on that?
it's probably one of the most important skills of our day to learn. I think the it's going to become sentient. You know, it's going to, the I call it the Skynet philosophy, that it's going to become this Terminator, Skynet. That stuff is actually, like, I've studied the history of it. I've studied the science, the technical, the actual infrastructure of it. It is possible, but with our current computer load, how much electricity these things actually need, like, we're not there yet. We're far away from that mode. But as a skill, it's probably one of the most important skills somebody could be learning right now, because what's happening literally right now in the tech world, and is going to start dribbling down to the other businesses, is companies are starting to keep employees that use AI because they're way more productive, and employees that are not, or if their job is replaceable. Like, for instance, um, writing right now. A lot of my blog posts, a lot of my emails, things that I would have hired a writer for, I can do that now with the AI, and so it is replacing different jobs. But a writer with AI now all of a sudden is a massive productivity boost, and so, like, where I can hire some writers now, it's like I would hire this writer because now he could write me 10 articles a day, versus I used to hire an one that would give me one article a week, and so
Yeah.
um, that's where it's changing. It's a very important skill, but it's not going to take over the world, anytime soon. They're running up against, if you think about the iPhone and mobile phones in general, when they first came out, there was all these big changes between different models and the new features that they were adding. Like iPhone 1 to iPhone 6 was major changes in the device. But if you look at, like, iPhone 12 versus iPhone 16, there's a couple pixels different in the camera. There's a little bit faster processor. Like, these little tiny changes start happening, and that's where we're coming in AI. There was these massive leaps, but now if you think about all the announcements that are coming, it's just getting
Yeah.
marginally better,
Yeah. You're
marginally
right.
better, marginally better.
Yep.
And that's because they're coming up against the physical limits of what's possible with these machines,
Yep.
until we have breakthroughs in electricity, quantum computing, until we have those breakthroughs, we're really coming up against what's possible.
That's very interesting. And I've noticed that as well. It moved really fast. There was a big jump, but now it's kind of incremental changes that are, that are being made. So one of the things that I want to now transition into is really something, just on a personal level. And this is right around the time when I got to know you. We met through a mutual friend. Shout out to Alejandro Reyes, good buddy of both of ours. And
Yeah.
I remember him telling me about you. And this was actually before you gave your life to Christ, before you had this journey began with walking with Jesus. And one of the things that he mentioned to me, and I'll never forget, he said, "Man," he said, "I'm praying for this guy. This guy is getting close. I could feel it. God is getting a hold of him." At this time, you were, you know, I might even say devout atheist. Like I don't know how how much of a champion you were, but it sounded like you were a pretty hardcore atheist. And
Hmm.
so I want to get into your journey. What was life like as an atheist, and then how did God actually get a hold of you?
Well, I recently went to confessional for my first time. And I know that we can confess straight to God, but I wanted to do the process. I wanted to see what it was like, you know. So I went down to a local Catholic church and actually went into the confessional room and confessed to the priest. And I remember saying to him, I don't know how detailed you want to get because this could get long, but it's probably easier to say that I've never deleted anybody or wronged a woman. You know, I don't want to put the words in here for YouTube or wherever you end up going, you know. It was like easier to say like I've never done those two things, but I've made all the other mistakes, you know. Um, and so that's what life was like as an atheist. I was good at being bad. You know, I didn't just drink alcohol. I drank alcohol like it was my sport. You know, I didn't just waste money. I wasted money egregiously. You know, I don't even know if that's a word. You know, I think I mixed two words there, but I, yeah, I just lived in way too much excess, way too much addiction, and that led to, you know, I'm now losing weight. You can see I still got quite a bit of weight to lose, but since finding God, you know, my blood pressure has been fixed. I'm eating healthier. I'm actually working out. Like everything that was wrong is now becoming right in
Wow.
every single way. My relationship with my wife, the things I watch on TV, the music I listen to in my car, the things I write about, you know, it's like every single area of my life, from even the toothpaste that I buy, you know, I buy like a natural toothpaste. I didn't care. You know, I didn't care about like why you should have a natural toothpaste, but like, yeah, it's changed every single area of my life.
And how did you, back when you were an atheist, what was your perspective of Christians, and kind of what did you think about them?
Oh, I thought, you know, so I was in a sense shopping for Christians. I had this like world religions book. I looked at it like a shopping catalog. You know, like I thought religions were like clubs because I didn't believe in
Mm.
actual gods. You know, I thought they were like clubs, and it's like, you know, and if anything, I was looking for like Shintoism or Buddhism because if I'm being honest, I would love to dress like that. Like I think that just looks cool. You know, I would love to be walking around in the robes and whatever. Um, and I was just looking through those and I thought I was picking out, that's what I thought about. Like I thought it was a way you dress. I thought it was a people group you hung out with. I didn't think anything about it was actual gods. And the farthest one was Christianity because I thought Christians were stupid. I thought they were weak. I thought they were, you know, they believed in this propaganda, all the things that the, you know, atheist, all the silly complaints that they have and silly theories that they have, I had all of them, you know, and it was really ignorance. You know, I didn't know that over there was over 5,000 hard pieces of evidence. You know, I didn't know that you could prove the Bible timeline and the people and the places, and I didn't know that there was 500 eyewitnesses of the resurrection. You know, it's like in a court of law today, you only need one eyewitness to prove something. We're talking about 500 eyewitnesses. So I didn't know all of these things. When I learned them, I had seen too much evidence.
So what was it? What was the thing, or how did God actually get your attention and start getting a hold of you? What was it? One thing, or was it just over time, or what was that like for you?
God is such a G, and that's kind of a pun. But he's also a G. Um, and he's so cool. Like, what turned me away years ago was science. You know, like my big question, because I was baptized and I went to a Catholic church as a young kid. I'm talking before 12. And the only reason I did communion is because they told me you get a lot of money. You know, when you do your first communion, everybody gives you money. And I bought my first Nintendo, and I got the Contra video game with my Nintendo. And so, like, that's the only reason I did it. You know, I didn't actually believe in any of the things. Um, but I started asking the priests and teachers and parents, like, well, what about the dinosaurs? What about the, and they would just say, believe, just believe, you know, and they wouldn't answer my question. They didn't know how to answer my question. And so I went to the library, and the library had an answer: evolution and books about dinosaurs and all that stuff. And when I saw that, that kind of pulled me away. So science pulled me away, and then God used science to pull me back in, you
Wow.
know. And then I went to church for the first time. I moved up here to Tennessee. It was just between my New York family and my, you know, it wasn't about like the Bible Belt or anything like that. It was just halfway between my New York and Florida family. Um, and when I got here, I went to a local church, but I didn't go to a local, I wasn't going for God. You know, I'm a businessman and I wanted to meet businessmen in the area. And I figured, you know, oh, well, this is Tennessee. I kind of know this place is like a Bible Belt place. Like there's going to be people in church. So I'm going to go there. But I went with money on my mind. Like I went to church to try and meet other business owners. When I got there, I had the pastor gave the most personal message of my life, like things I hadn't confessed to my mom, to my wife, like things I'd never talked to anybody about. He was talking about them, and it felt like, this is weird, but it felt like the words were like lightning bolts going directly into my forehead. It was a
Wow.
completely crazy experience. I got into the car afterwards, and I told my wife, who was a believer her whole life, I was like, "What was that? What just happened there?" She was like, "What do you mean?" I was like, clearly that guy looked me up online. Clearly he spent all night listening to my podcast interviews and he's probably scrolled my Facebook for hours. Like that's how vain I was. I thought
Yeah.
the pastor cared so much about me coming into his church that he spent his whole night researching me just so he could preach for me. You know, that still didn't convert me. That just made me mad. I was like, all right, I'm going to prove this guy's doing some form of dark persuasion. While I'm at it, I'll prove Christianity is wrong too. I thought it was going to be like a weekend blog post, you know, like I thought I was going to create some good viral, you know, here I read a couple books, I can prove it now. Turns out people have been trying for 2,000 years to disprove this. Turns out there's whole colleges on this, and there's thousands of scholars and PhD material. Turns out it's not that easy to disprove Christianity. And so I kept digging in. And at that point of my career, or that time of the year, is the end of the year, kind of like that September through December. My business almost runs without me during that time because we got like Black Friday sales and end of the year sales, and you know it's just a good time of the year for us. And so I was able to take almost all the time off, and so I literally spent like 40 hours a week. It was like my job studying this stuff, but not because I was smart. You know, I was sitting in on MIT lectures about thermonuclear law. I was listening to how DNA actually works, you know, in science classes and things like that. Not because I'm smart, but because I kept trying to prove it wrong. But everything I dug into just kept leading me to more and more evidence that the Bible was true and that God was real, you know, and so after like 300 plus hours of digging into all this stuff and digging as hard as I could, I was alone in a hotel room. I was watching actually Lee Strobel's Case for Christ. And there's a moment in that movie where the doctor or a scientist says to the character, says, when is enough evidence going to be enough? And I don't know if you've ever experienced it, like if you knock a cup off of a counter or you knock something down, it's like this slow motion effect happens where it's happening in like a nanosecond, but like you feel like it's like 3 minutes that are going by. And so that moment that happened right after he said, when is enough evidence going to be enough, felt like minutes, but was probably half a second. And in that time, I knew I'd seen too much evidence. I knew I was on the wrong side. I knew I was going to hell. And I didn't have a Bible. I didn't know how to pray yet. There was no pastor or priest around. I still thought Sky Daddy, right? Still, And so I just look up at the ceiling and I say, okay, God, you win. Teach me how to be a good Christian. That was my sinner's prayer or whatever. And it was my submission, right? It was, okay,
Mm.
God, you win. It was me submitting. Teach me how to be a good Christian. And man, my life has been a whirlwind ever since. I ended up going to Bible college. I want to go back. I didn't finish at that one. I do want to go back, but I remember telling the college recruiter, I was like, look, I need to come to Bible college or I'm going to end up buying the whole row at Barnes and Nobles because I was just buying every book that I could. And I still today, I just can't stop the hunger I have to learn more about him. And so that's my story.
That's amazing. And so, one of the benefits that I had was watching you kind of got connected to you right when this was happening, or,
Mm.
around 5 years ago. And one of the things you used to do was give a Christian life update, and kind of just say, hey, this, and I thought that was really cool because it was like, you never, I've now been walking with the Lord for over 20 years and, things change and, things that you started out for that were hard are now normal and so it was really cool to watch it from your perspective on here's this guy who was an atheist for most of his life and now he's had this radical conversion and he's digging in, he's talking about all these things about dinosaurs and bones and science and all this stuff and how God is in doing things in your life. And so I was like, man, this is really interesting.
Yeah, I
uh,
have from it was like I shared a picture of my baptism, them dunking me, and the post just said, "Boy, do I have a crazy story to tell you guys." And so I have from that post to my first 200 weeks all written out in posts on Facebook.
yeah, which is really cool to have, first of all, really cool to see from an outsider. But I'm curious, like, walk us through, you're living this, in your words, like this debaucherous life, right? Of just only gratifying the flesh. And you now come to this intersection where, you meet Christ, you see the truth of God, and you're having this experience. How does that now translate into changing your day-to-day life? Like, what was life like in that early stage? How did you kind of like manage those two things, and what was that like for you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the biggest changes is I pray a lot, and so my first thing that I do in the morning, I open my eyes, and the first thing I do is I pray about thanks.
Mm.
I thank him for the day. I thank him for the blanket. I thank him for the pillow. Like I just thank him for anything I'm thinking or feeling in the moment. And then I actually have a prayer room in my house now. We cleared out one of the rooms and I go into my prayer room for the first half hour to hour. Some days it's an hour, a lot of days it's a half hour. But I go in there and I start out by praying, and then I'll read the Bible some, or if there's a book I'm into, but always something spiritual, spiritual food kind of stuff. And then I go about my day, and a lot of my day, pray throughout the day, wear this hat all the time. It says I know a ghost, and it's kind of inbound evangelism. People always ask me, "Hey, what does your hat say?" I was like, "I'm glad you asked." And um, so yeah, that's my day has changed quite a bit because of that. But then also relationships. I've had to ask my wife to let me lead the family, because I heard the phrase happy wife, happy life. And I turned that into, okay, she makes all the decisions. She drives the car. Like it was just, I just completely abdicated all my authority, all of everything, and made it like happy wife, happy life. Like, oh, okay, I'll just let you make all the decisions, which actually was crushing my wife and creating anxiety and stress
Mm.
and all that stuff. And so, probably 2.5, 3 years into my walk with Christ, I wrote her a long, loving letter. Um, Gets emotional. Just talking about how, like, I know all the things that I did that made you lose trust. So when I say you're not currently trusting me, I don't mean that you've done something wrong. I mean that I've done something terribly wrong. But take a look at my life since I've started walking with the Lord, how well I'm fathered now, and the studies, and I haven't made any mistakes like I used to be making. The money's right, the business is right. I'm walking the path. And what I'm asking is that you would let me take the reins. And so we had to learn about headship and submission and all of those things. And that's kind of the walk we're going through now. And it's been amazing. I mean, it is I didn't know that you could. I'm 43. I've been married for almost 20 years now. Yeah, 2027 will be 20 years. And I had always heard that when you're married that long, love changes. It's more of like a respect kind of love. I'm here to tell you that's a lie. Like we are giddy dating. Like, I mean, we are just as passionate right now as we were when we were teenagers sneaking away into the room when nobody was looking. Like, we feel that way again. And I believe it's about we've created the right order in the house again,
Mm.
and that has turned into so much passion and love and trust. And it's been amazing.
Oh, that's awesome. And I think that's a whole nother episode right there. Like, cause yeah, I know a lot of people, that's a real big need. What one other aspect that I wanted to talk to you about or ask you about is, one thing I've noticed from you is you've from day one, you've never been shy about sharing the gospel and sharing, and you have this evangelistic nature to you where I can see your heart is to reach people, reach the lost, reach people who are just like you. Give us an idea on some of the things that you're currently involved in with like faith funnels and some of these other projects. What are some of the ways that you're reaching other people for Christ?
Yeah, so we've got an Instagram channel and a social media channel called Sword and Solace, and we share like sermon clips and quotes, pastor quotes, book quotes, and things like that. Just helpful Christian stuff, and we share 3 times a day. We do it on Instagram and YouTube. We're reaching 300,000. We have 300,000 views a month. Our subscriber counts aren't that high because they're not that old, but we view wise we have 300,000 views a month on YouTube. We've got 1 million views a month on Instagram with our content. So those are two of the things that we're doing, and now we're translating that into an agency. And so Faith Funnels is now becoming an agency where we're helping small churches be able to turn their, like I want to help pastors turn their sermons into Instagram posts and YouTube sermons. And I know there's AI tools and stuff that can do that, but I just don't think the church is there yet with AI. I think they want to pay a person still to do that stuff. And so for the churches that want to have a person to help them, that's what Faith Funnels is. And I'm building it with my brother and my nephew, and they're recently baptized as well. And so it's just a great story. It's a father and son team. I'm more of the advisor. It's my brother and his son, and so it's a father-son team building an agency. All they want to do is they just want to work in the kingdom, and so they're just helping pastors grow their churches through Instagram and social media.
That's awesome, man. That really is. What would you say to other people? Because I know a ton, I'm sure you know a ton that are very passionate about kingdom building. They got a message on their heart. They want to build the kingdom online. What's your thoughts about, just being a creator, like a content creator as a Christian? Like, is there room for it? Do we need more? Like, what's kind of your thoughts on that for those that want to create content?
Yeah, the first thing that's jumping out of me is be about it, don't talk about it.
Mm.
Like jump in, King. There's a lot of places, there's a lot of lanes. If you want to start a podcast, you can do a podcast, you can do a YouTube, you could do a blog, you could do a social media. Like there's a lot of ways to do it. And what I love so much about Christianity as a marketer, um, is the content's already done. Like
Mm.
you can literally start a Bible verse Instagram page and it's going to do well. And you'll have thousands of verses to pick from. There's 2,000 years of history of books and pastors and sermons. There's things that are out of copyright because it's Christianity and things are super old, and so they've come out of copyright, and you can use that stuff. And so there's so much of the content is already made. You can start a whole blog just about the principles in Proverbs. You can start a business blog just teaching Proverbs to people and Ecclesiastes to people. So there's so much to do, and there's so many great people that are paving the way. The Ruslans and the Talon Michaels and the Cap Chatfields, and there's a lot of great people paving the way for content. Yourself, creating content for the kingdom. So I would say if that's really on your heart, stop talking about it and be about it. Jump in and learn.
Yeah. I remember not too long ago, you were doing a documentary project, specifically revolving around money and how Christians, how kingdom entrepreneurs and business owners, and just in general, how we view money. And I wanted to just kind of land the plane and get your thoughts on that, because I know that this has been a big issue for myself from time to time. And it's also too one that I see rampant in the church. We really don't, in my opinion, we really don't have a lot of good, I don't want to say good teaching, but there's this kind of empty spot a lot of times when it comes to how we relate to money, especially as entrepreneurs, which we need money, right? That's how we grow our business. What are some of the things that you were doing with that project, and what did you kind of discover?
Yeah. Let me, if you give me a share request real quick,
Yep.
just gonna super quick share my screen. And so I did end up making that documentary. It didn't go super well. I love the content. Everybody that's viewed it told me they love the content, but for whatever reason, the algorithm doesn't seem to love the content. I think it's a fire thumbnail. But okay, so I started with this one, In God We Trust. Why is this stamped on every dollar? And it goes and talks about God and money. And then this one talks about the principles, wealth principles of King Solomon. This is the most insane fortune ever built, the billionaire king. And so both of those, together, it's almost about an hour's worth of content. And yeah, I mean, so that's all of my thoughts on that subject of how we should use money correctly as a tool. We shouldn't hoard it. We should be a flow through. I think generosity is the key. And when we're a flow through, that's how we can make millions, because God's like, hey, all right, he's going to distribute to the right places. He's a trustworthy man, and so I'm going to flow through him. But if we're a stop, right, like we hoard the money, well, then we're not going to flow through, because it's like, all right, when I send money to this unit, it stops here. So I need to find another guy that I can send the money through, because then it'll flow through. And I talk about all of that. And so I don't know. What other questions do you have about that?
Yeah, I think one of the things is, how from a financial perspective, how do you view Matthew 6:33, which is seek first the kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. I think that
Mm,
this verse was given in the context of people worrying about certain things,
mhm,
right? And I think that that's a real, like, especially for us in America and in capitalism and things like consumeristic society, everything's like got to get more, got to have more, got to do more, be more. And I know myself, I found myself a lot of times worrying about not having enough, when the reality is I have more than enough. And so I'm just curious, everybody kind of has a different interpretation of how Matthew 6:33 kind of,
mhm.
how they see it. I'm curious from you and your perspective as a Christian entrepreneur and doing some research on money and faith. How does Matthew 6:33 kind of relate to you?
Yeah, I think that never would I say, churches are bad or anything like that. I think they're great. I think the local church is one of the most powerful institutions that's ever been created and will probably always be. And I watched it here in my local town when Hurricane Helene decimated our town and literally houses were floating down the streets. You know who showed up first? The churches.
Mm.
While FEMA and everybody was still trying to get their stuff together and the government was trying to figure out what's what and where to go, the churches were already on ATVs driving through the mud, saving families, pulling people out of trees. Like that's what the church showed up and did. It was amazing to see. And so I think churches are amazing. But I also think when he says, seek first the kingdom, it's not just building churches and pulpits and um, Bible Instagram pages. I think it's the principles delivered through humanity. So I think what he means is become the type of person that spreads the kingdom, that is the kingdom, that, shows the kingdom through your lifestyle. So, create generosity in yourself, create obedience in yourself, and then start teaching your family about those things and your friends about those things and your community about those things. And it's like, building the kingdom is leaving an extra big tip when you're at the restaurant. Building the kingdom is being respectful to the DMV person, when the line was long, and it's like being the shining light, the one person in the day that was like, you know what, that person was delightful. That person, was had a smile and was respectful. I think building the kingdom is more than just building a bunch of churches. I think it's about spreading the principles that God is teaching us throughout the land and starting, I think, with ourselves, then our families, then our friends, then our communities, then our cities, and and it just spreads out from there. And we all did that. That is building the kingdom. It's not necessarily going and building another church, though we need those. It's about in the workforce, in the schools, our neighbors, it's all that stuff is building the kingdom.
Oh, that's awesome. Are there any projects or things that you're working on kind of in the future, looking down the next, year or two? Where's kind of your focus at, just in your business as well as in your faith? What are some of the things on the horizon for you?
Still building ad skills. I like my lane. I believe I'm supposed to be there. The latest thing I've been looking at, I think it was Isaiah 2:22 or 22:22, but it's where he talks about um, only God can open doors, and the doors that he opens. And I think we misunderstand that. It's actually like a warning passage, not like a celebration passage. And it's about a man who is not doing things right, and then he's being replaced by a man who's going to be a good steward of the things. And so that's what I'm trying to figure out. How do I do that in a very secular business, right? I'm in advertising, which is all about money and profit. And so, how do I bring God's principles to that? How do I steward that better? And so, that's a lot of what I'm working on. And then also at the same time, I have to deliver how is AI changing the actual Google ad industry and things like that. So, I have to navigate what's happening in the secular as well as what's happening in the spiritual and try to bring those two things together. And so, I've got my work cut out for me. I got job security in that lane, but also I'm trying to figure out how do I bring some of these ideas to the church because I believe it is one of the most powerful institutions. And so I'm trying to bring some of what I know how to do with growth to pastors and churches to help them make more money because I know pastors need more income. I know pastors need more first time visitors. Like these are things that I have a skill set to do. And so that's what I'm trying to do in the faith funnels world. So add skills in the secular world, faith funnels in the church world.
No, and I think that's awesome. I think it's really, you may not see this, but I think it's really awesome to see how you've been able to navigate that. It almost just looks like, effortlessly, the Lord is really giving you wisdom. And I know there's been a lot of things behind the scenes, but you've done your due diligence, you've figured things out, and you have a direction. And I think it comes from, those actions of obedience where God tells you, hey, this is great, but this is not what I want you to focus on. And because of that, there's a blessing that comes with it, right? Whenever we heed the Lord's words, we're always going to get blessed. What would be some encouragement or advice, counsel, whatever you want to call it, to Christian business owners out there that, a lot of them I've experienced are going through a bit of a tough time. And either they're working so much in their business that they never have time for their faith, or a lot of times all they want to do is just build the kingdom, but they got to make money. And so they're struggling financially. What would be kind of your encouragement or advice to Christian entrepreneurs?
Uh, Cry. It's fine, but cry to Jesus. Like my wife has said, she was like, you're just so much more patient now. Like you're able to deal with people that like these really frustrating, hard situations. You're able to do them with such grace now. And I was like, yeah, because I yell and scream and cry in the room every morning at 6 a.m. Like I get it. It's like going to the gym, right? Like I get to get all of that out of me in my prayer time, and I give all that to Jesus, and he takes all of that, and then I'm able to go through the day because I couldn't do it weeks, right? Like I don't have the willpower to be saint-like or anything like that for a long time. I got a few hours. I could probably keep it together, and in those times, and that's what Jesus did, right? Like Jesus kept going away to nap and to pray, and so like take naps and pray, and that will help you get through the hard times. Like, I was reading Job this morning. Who had it harder than Job? I don't think anybody had it harder than Job. And in the hardness, like if you actually read the beginning, 1 through 7, Job 1 through 7, and you read, he's literally everything in his life is being taken away from him. Kids just die, all of his everything within minutes is being taken away from him, and he falls down to worship God and tells his wife, like, how dare we not say that, if God can do the good, God can do the bad as well. And I think he was, working out his phraseology in there. But he didn't immediately turn his back. Like he was like, no, I'm still with God, even when everything was taken away from him. And so when you're going through the hard times, praise God. When you're going through the good times, praise God. And just take some time every morning and go cry with Jesus, get it out, and then get back to work, soldier.
That's it. That's it. Very good. So, for those that are listening and they're like, man, I like this guy, I like what he's doing, I like some of the things he mentioned. Where can people find you? What are some of your channels, some of the things they can tap into some of your content?
So if you Google Justin Brooke, you'll find all my interviews and podcasts and YouTube and LinkedIn and all that stuff. I'm on LinkedIn. Kind of my homes online are LinkedIn and Twitter. I really like X. Facebook kind of kicked me out, but I do have an Instagram as well, at Faith Funnels on Instagram if you want to kind of follow what I'm doing in that world. But I'd love to connect on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, man, I appreciate you, Justin. I appreciate our friendship. I appreciate just watching your journey. I feel like there's a connection there. We've never met in person, but I feel like I know you, man. You're a brother.
Yeah,
I've watched your
we're
journey.
homies.
We're homies, man. We're homies. So I appreciate your time, man. Thank you for joining me on Kingdom Creative.
No problem, man.